So here's another exercise where we're going to calculate the exact values of sine, cosine, and tangent here for negative 120 degrees. So we're working with degrees in this problem. And we're going to do this by hand with no calculator, just using what we've learned and memorized in this course so far. So we got to draw the angle and standard position. The reason we need to draw the angle is we need to determine which quadrant the terminal side lies in. And here's x, y. Now, negative 120 degrees, so we're rotating from the positive x-axis in a clockwise direction. We're more than negative 90. We're less than negative 180. I think you can see we're going to be here. There's our negative 120 degrees. And so we got to observe that the terminal side is in quadrant 3. That's going to help us determine whether to use positive or negative values. The reference angle is formed by the terminal side in the x-axis. The reference angle is right here. And because we're approaching negative 180, you should be able to figure this out. If you just take 180 minus 120, we get 60. There's 60 more degrees to go there. Remember, the reference angle is always positive. And so the reference angle is 60 degrees. So let's go ahead and do our trig function values now. So we want the sine of negative 120 degrees is going to be plus or minus the sine of its reference angle, which is 60 degrees. And here we got to choose, plus or minus. Now, we're in quadrant 3. If I just pick a point on that terminal side, both the x and the y coordinate are negative. Now, remember, the x tells us about cosine. The y tells us about sine. We won't get it mixed up here because they're both negative. But that negative y tells me, again, because of quadrant 3, that sine will be negative. So I take minus sine of 60 degrees. And so that's minus a value we have memorized from earlier in the course. The sine of 60 degrees is square root of 3 over 2. And so there's my sine of 120 degrees. Cosine of negative 120 degrees. The negative is crucial here because positive 120 is in a totally different location. Cosine of negative 120 degrees is plus or minus cosine of the reference angle, 60 degrees. Again, we got to choose. And it's going to be negative, right? Because we're in quadrant 3, where both sine and cosine are negative. So that's a quadrant 3 choice. And that's going to be negative cosine of 60 degrees. That I shouldn't have to even look at my yellow card. I want to have this in my head. Is 1/2. So it's negative 1/2. Both the sine and cosine are negative for negative 120 degrees. Tangent of negative 120 degrees. Again, for all the other trig functions, I think it's just work from sine and cosine. Learn how to get them from sine and cosine. That's usually going to be the easiest. You can sometimes get tangent directly, but here I think it's easiest to just take sine of negative 120 over cosine of negative 120 degrees. Sine of negative 120 was negative square root of 3 over 2. Cosine is negative 1/2. They're both negative, but because we have negative divided by negative, we get a positive answer, right? And I'll just write that for emphasis. And we get, when we divide this out, we're going to get just square root of 3. So tangent of negative 120 degrees is square root of 3. So there's our sine, cosine, and tangent. Get as much as I can into that picture. One more exercise completed.